Hello, English learners. Welcome to today's episode. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to become fluent in English in just 3 months, you're in the right place. I'm Jessica, and today we'll break down exactly how you can make it happen.
That's right. That's right, Jessica. I'm Michael, and in this episode, we'll give you a step-by-step guide on how you can maximize your English learning in just 3 months. We'll be covering everything from setting goals to practicing speaking, listening, and improving vocabulary. And you know what's really amazing? It's actually possible to get really good at English in just 3 months. I mean, I've done it myself, and I've helped hundreds of others do the same thing.
That sounds almost too good to be true. How did you even figure this out?
Well, here's the thing. I actually started developing this method when I was, teaching English abroad, and I noticed certain patterns that just kept coming up again and again with my most successful students. Like, there are these specific techniques that just work so incredibly well.
Okay, I know our listeners are going to want to hear absolutely everything about this. Can we, break it down step by step? So I think the first thing we really need to talk about is, the whole mindset thing, right? Because I keep hearing that's super important when learning any language.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is probably the most crucial part that people tend to overlook. Like, having the right mindset is literally everything when it comes to mastering English quickly.
Can you explain what you mean by the right mindset? What does that actually look like?
So here's the thing. First and foremost, you've got to completely believe that you can do this. And I mean really believe it, deep down. Because what I've seen time and time again is that people who approach this with a kind of hesitant or doubtful attitude, they're already setting themselves up for difficulties.
That makes so much sense. But how do you actually develop that kind of confidence?
Well, it starts with setting really specific, really achievable goals. And this is key. You want to break down that big 3-month goal into smaller daily targets. Like, maybe today you're focusing on mastering 20 new phrasal verbs. Or maybe you're going to have 3 conversations with native speakers.
Oh, wow. So it's more about these tiny steps than this huge, overwhelming goal?
Exactly. And here's something I always tell my students. You need to track these small wins. Like, keep a journal or use an app, whatever works for you. Because when you see yourself making progress day after day, that's what really keeps you motivated.
And what about when people hit those moments where they feel like, giving up?
That's such a great question. So what I've found works incredibly well is having what I call a motivation toolkit. And basically, this means having specific strategies ready for when you hit those rough patches. Like, maybe it's rewarding yourself after completing a challenging task, or connecting with other language learners who can relate to what you're going through.
That's really interesting. Could you share some of those specific reward strategies that work best?
Of course. So one thing that works really well is creating these mini celebrations for yourself. Like, maybe after mastering a particularly tough grammar concept, you treat yourself to your favorite coffee. Or maybe you set up a movie night where you watch your favorite film in English without subtitles. The key is, you want to make these rewards meaningful to you personally.
So, Michael, when we talk about immersion, what exactly are we looking at here? How do you actually surround yourself with English?
Oh, this is actually one of my favorite topics to discuss. Immersion is really about creating this kind of English bubble around yourself. And the beauty of it is that in today's world, it's actually incredibly doable.
What are some practical ways people can start doing this right now?
So let me break this down. First off, your phone. That's literally the easiest place to start. Change your phone's language settings to English, and suddenly, every notification, every app, everything you do becomes an English learning opportunity.
That's actually a really simple change that could make a huge difference.
Exactly. And then there's media consumption. Like, you want to completely immerse yourself in English content. I'm talking podcasts, just like English Pod here, YouTube videos, Netflix shows, everything. But here's the key thing. You need to start with content that's just slightly above your current level.
And what about, actually speaking with people? That's gotta be important, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. Speaking is absolutely crucial. And nowadays, there are so many options. Like you can use language exchange apps, join online conversation groups, or even find local English meetups. The thing is, you want to aim for at least one real conversation in English every single day.
That sounds pretty intense. Like finding someone to talk to every day.
Look, I totally get that concern. But here's the thing. It doesn't always have to be a long conversation. Even a 5-minute chat with someone at a coffee shop or a quick video call with a language partner can make a huge difference. And what's really cool is that there are actually apps now that can connect you with native speakers 24/7.
What about changing your environment at home? Any tips for that?
Oh, absolutely. So this is what I call the sticky note revolution. Like you literally want to label everything in your house in English and create these little English zones where you only allow yourself to think and speak in English. Maybe your kitchen becomes an English-only zone, or your morning routine has to be done completely in English. Completely.
That's such a creative approach. Any other environmental changes you'd recommend?
Yes. Another really powerful strategy is creating what I call an English morning routine. So you start your day with English news, maybe an English podcast during your commute, and even talking to yourself in English while getting ready. The key is consistency and creating these habitual touch points throughout your day where English becomes your default mode of thinking and communicating.
So Michael, we've talked about immersion, but what about the actual nitty-gritty of learning? Like, what specific techniques should people focus on?
Oh, this is absolutely crucial. You know, when it comes to really mastering English in 3 months, you need to have this systematic approach to the core elements. And I've actually developed what I call the triple threat method.
What does that involve exactly?
So it breaks down into 3 main areas, right? First, vocabulary acquisition. And this is where most people actually get it wrong. Like instead of just memorizing random words, you want to focus on what I call high-impact vocabulary clusters.
What do you mean by clusters?
Well, you see, it's about learning words that are connected to specific situations or themes. So instead of learning the word negotiate in isolation, you learn it along with phrases like make a deal, come to terms, and reach an agreement. This creates this natural network in your brain.
And what about, grammar? That's always the scary part for most people.
The thing is, grammar doesn't have to be scary at all. Here's what I always tell my students. Focus on patterns, not rules. Like, you want to start with the most commonly used sentence structures and really master those first, and then gradually build up from there.
Could you give us some specific examples?
Of course. So let's take something like the present perfect tense. Instead of memorizing rules, you start by learning these super common phrases like I've been there or I've never seen that. And you practice these until they become completely natural. The key is you're learning grammar through actual usage, not textbook exercises.
What about pronunciation? That seems to be a big challenge for many learners.
Oh yes, pronunciation is absolutely critical. And here's the game changer. It's all about focused listening and shadowing. Like you want to find a native speaker you really connect with, maybe a YouTube creator or a podcast host, and literally mimic their speech patterns.
That makes so much sense. Any specific tools you'd recommend?
Absolutely. So there are these amazing apps now that can actually analyze your pronunciation and give you instant feedback. But here's my number 1 tip. Record yourself speaking English every single day. Just a minute or 2. And then compare it to native speakers. The progress you'll see over 3 months is it's absolutely incredible.
Speaking of progress, what about the mistakes people usually make? Like, what are the big pitfalls we should watch out for?
Oh, this is such an important point. You know, I've seen so many people fall into these same traps over and over. And I actually made quite a few of these mistakes myself when I was learning languages.
What would you say is the biggest one?
The absolute biggest one, and I see this all the time, It's what I call the perfection paralysis. People get so caught up in trying to speak perfectly that they end up barely speaking at all. And let me tell you a quick story about one of my students.
Oh yeah?
So there was this amazing student I had, right? Totally brilliant, knew all the grammar rules perfectly, but she was just terrified of making mistakes. And it was actually holding her back so much. The turning point came when I convinced her to just jump into conversations without overthinking.
And how did that work out for her?
It was like absolutely transformative. Within just a few weeks, her fluency just skyrocketed because, she finally started actually using the language instead of just studying it.
What about other common mistakes you've noticed?
Oh yes, another huge one is what I call the comfort zone trap. People tend to stick with the same learning materials, same vocabulary, same everything, and they wonder why they're not progressing. Like you've got to constantly push yourself into new territory.
How do you recommend people push past that?
So, here's what I always say. Every single day, do something that makes you slightly uncomfortable in English. Maybe it's watching a movie without subtitles, or calling a customer service line in English, or even writing a blog post. The key is consistent challenges.
That makes sense. Any other big pitfalls?
Oh, absolutely. The isolated learning trap. You see, so many people think they can master English just by studying alone in their room. But language is social, right? And you need that interaction to really develop your skills. It's like trying to learn to swim without getting in the water.
How do you suggest people overcome that?
Well, in today's world, there are just so many opportunities. Like you can join language exchange groups online, find conversation partners through apps, or even participate in virtual language meetups. The key is making that human connection. You know what I mean? Because that's where real learning happens.
So, Michael, how do you actually keep track of all this progress? Like, what's the best way to know if you're actually improving?
Oh, this is actually super important. And I'm really excited to share this because, tracking progress is absolutely crucial for staying motivated. So what I always recommend is keeping what I call a language learning journal.
What exactly do you put in that?
So basically, you want to record everything, and I mean everything. Like, write down new phrases you've learned, track your daily speaking time, note down any interesting conversations you've had. It's really about creating this complete picture of your journey.
That sounds pretty detailed.
Exactly. And here's the thing that makes it so powerful. You can actually look back and see how far you've come. Like, sometimes people feel stuck, but then they look at their journal from just a few weeks ago and they're like, wow, I couldn't even form these sentences back then.
Are there any specific metrics people should track?
Yes, absolutely. So, I always tell my students to track 3 main things. First, your speaking time, like how many minutes or hours you spent actually conversing in English. Second, your vocabulary growth. Maybe set a target of learning 10 new words each day. And third, track your comfort level with different situations.
How do you track comfort level, though?
So what I do is use this simple scale from 1 to 5, right? Like maybe at first making a phone call in English is a 1, super uncomfortable. But then, and this is the beautiful part, you might notice that after a few weeks, it's become a 3 or even a 4.
What about staying accountable? That's always the hard part.
Oh my goodness, yes. And this is where having a language learning buddy becomes absolutely crucial. Find someone who's also learning English. Or even better, find a native speaker who's learning your language. Set up regular check-ins, share your progress, celebrate your wins together.
Are there any apps that can help with this?
So many. Like there are these fantastic apps that gamify your learning journey. They track your daily streaks, give you points for consistency, and even let you compete with friends. But honestly, the most powerful accountability tool is just making a public commitment.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's like, tell your friends and family about your 3-month goal. Post about it on social media. Maybe even start a blog or YouTube channel about your journey. Because when you put it out there, you're so much more likely to follow through. You know what I mean?
So, Michael, after everything we've covered today, what would you say are the absolute key things our listeners should remember?
Oh, wow. Yes. Let me break this down because, mastering English in 3 months is totally doable if you follow these essential points. So first and foremost, it's all about mindset, right? You've got to believe you can do it and be ready to fully commit.
And what about the daily practices we talked about?
Yes. So the daily immersion is absolutely crucial. Like, you need to literally surround yourself with English everywhere, all the time. Watch shows in English, think in English, dream in English, and most importantly, speak as much as you possibly can, even if you're just talking to yourself.
That's so important. And the learning methods?
Exactly. Remember to focus on practical vocabulary first. Like, don't get caught up in fancy words you'll never use. And the whole thing about tracking progress, it's absolutely essential. Keep that language journal, set those specific goals, and really celebrate your wins, no matter how small they might seem.
I really like how you emphasized avoiding those common mistakes too.
Yes, definitely. The biggest one being afraid to make mistakes. Like, mistakes are literally your best friends on this journey. And remember to stay consistent with your study schedule, but also be kind to yourself. You know what I mean? It's about progress, not perfection.
Any final words of encouragement for our English Pod listeners?
Absolutely. Look, I want everyone to know that if you're listening to this right now, you've already taken the first step, and that's actually the hardest part. The next 3 months could literally transform your English skills if you just commit to this process and trust the journey. You've got this, and we're here rooting for you every step of the way.
Thanks for watching our podcast.